With Rurouni Kenshin Season 2, Episode 15, this is one of my favorite moments of the entire series, and it's one of the reasons why Kenshin was such a pivotal anime for me growing up, and why it meant so much to me. I'm going to try to explain why in this video, if I can. But essentially, watching this new Kenshin anime is interesting for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which is how familiar I am with the 90s anime and comparing and contrasting and seeing the differences and additions and different choreography and the different ways that the anime goes about doing it. But most particularly, the first time I ever saw this scene was, 20 years ago when I first watched that original 90s anime where I was 14, 15, 16, however old I was, and now I'm in my 30s. And it's interesting to see how I felt the first time I watched this scene, and also how I feel about it now that there's been so much distance in my own life. I've gone on my own journeys, I've gone on my own adventures similar to Kenshin, and now I have ended up in this spot where I'm rewatching this same sequence in a different way. It's a different anime, it's a different version, but I'm rewatching the same scene, essentially, of something that really lit a spark in me when I was younger, and I really needed it at the time. So let's just talk about the episode in general before we get to the big moment. This, of course, is an episode that focuses 100% on Kenshin and his master Hiko, as he is training to learn the final techniques of Hiten Mitsurugi. And a couple of great things happen during this process. We get some more flashbacks of Kenshin's youth. We see that he was rescued by Hiko. People that he was traveling with were attacked by bandits, and Hiko was in the right place at the right time. And in the beginning of this episode, you see just how devastating of a fighter Hiko can be, where he just tears through this entire group of bandits, no problem whatsoever. But the main issue is he arrived just a little bit too late, and everybody that Kenshin was traveling with is now dead. And at this point, Kenshin was just a small child. A little bit later in the episode, you find out this wasn't Kenshin's family. His family had actually died a bit earlier, and this was a group of slavers that had taken him. But even so, he had grown fond of some of the women that were taking care of him, and when they were being attacked, he felt this sort of innate responsibility to do something. He says something along the lines of, I was the only boy there. I felt like I wanted to take care of them the way that they took care of me. He really wanted to be able to do something in this moment, but unfortunately, in that particular moment, he was just too young, too small, untrained. He was a child. He couldn't do anything. And luckily, Hiko showed up when he did, but because of that, now Kenshin was left to his own devices. And seeing the amount of attention to detail of Kenshin making graves for every single person, the bandits included, Hiko was not expecting this. He rescued this child. He said, sorry for what happened. But, if you go into town and tell them, I'm sure you'll find somebody to take care of you. Hiko's not looking to adopt any children, right? He's just on his merry way traveling. But after he sees what Kenshin did and like the honor and respect that he gave them, and also this desire to protect, that I wish I could have been able to do something. I wish I had the power to do something, the strength to do something. I think that that's what really reflects something in Hiko when he sees Kenshin doing that, when he sees that Kenshin went out of his way to personally build all of these graves himself, and the fact that he had no one, and the fact that he had this drive to want to do something to help people. We learned that Kenshin's original name was Shinta, that of course he was renamed by Hiko to Kenshin, so a little interesting lore addition to Kenshin's backstory is that Kenshin is not actually even his real name, but it's the name he's used since he was like 7 years old, so we'll go with Kenshin. And there's also some really humorous additions that I like, where so Hiko takes Kenshin out and he goes to show him one of the attacks that he does not know of the Hiten Mitsurugi style, which is the Kuzuryu-sen, which essentially is this idea that you're hitting all 9 vital points at the exact same time. So there's 9 different places on the body that you would theoretically strike with a sword. And this is a maneuver, we're dealing with anime physics here, but this is a maneuver where you would hit all 9 points in the flash of an eye, and it's almost impossible to defend against. So you're fast, you're accurate, and you hit all the targets, person is basically turned into, chop suey at that point. So Kenshin attempts to do this technique right afterwards, and he does, he does. And you're like, okay, that's the final technique. And then I love how Hiko is like, no, that's not the final technique. This is something that you need to overcome in order to learn the final technique. And Kenshin's just like, because there's this whole buildup of Kenshin being able to do it, and because Kenshin's body is physically smaller and physically weaker than Hiko's, his Kuzurisen is not nearly as devastating as Hiko's is. So he's like, what does this mean? If I can't overcome his attack, if my attack is going to be not strong enough because of this or that. And Hiko's like, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. There's actually another technique beyond this. And you get this idea that their entire history of training was pretty much the same way, where Hiko would just be fucking with him the entire time and give him this massive amount of anxiety and pain and anguish and just watch him fail over and over again. But at the end of the day, that is the only way that you become stronger. You have to do it yourself. You have to fail. You have to understand the true difficulties of it with no matter what you're doing, whether you're training swordsmanship or lifting weights at the gym or going on runs or whatever. It's like you have to actually experience the difficulty. You have to experience the fatigue. You have to experience failure in order to be able to overcome it. Because if you don't know what that failure feels like, you're not going to know how to get past that point. You have to reach failure in order to surpass failure, And it's just one of those training things. But, in the process of teaching Kenshin that lesson, it's sort of like he's just fucking with him anyways and having fun with it. So that is what it is. But when it all comes to the actual final technique, which a Japanese phrase that I've remembered since being a teenager because I was so obsessed with this show, the Amakakaru Ryu no Hirameki. Yes, the Amakakaru Ryu no Hirameki. That is the actual final technique of Hiten Mitsurugi. And the reason is because it's the only thing that can overcome the Kuzuriusen. With Hiko being as strong and fast and accurate as he is, as hitting all 9 of those vital points in an instant, well, you have to be fast, you have to be accurate, and you have to put your heart and soul into this defensive maneuver, or else you're gonna die. And the only way to really teach Kenshin that is to actually have intent to kill him. So this is where it becomes a little bit tricky, because when it comes to Hiten Mitsurugi, there really only is one master at a time. And the reason for that is, well, the apprentice usually slays his master in the discovery of the final technique. So that also puts Kenshin into a predicament that he didn't know at the time, that was going to have to be the case, but Hiko, is prepared to attack him at full force. So if Kenshin had not discovered it in this moment, Kenshin would have died, and that's how serious it is. But there's a layer deeper that I think is the most important aspect of the technique itself in the show, but also what it meant to me growing up. And that is the thing that helps Kenshin discover it and survive is the desire to continue living, which is a lot different than where his headspace had been previous, where previously he was willing to die, right? So there's like this difference that goes into it where Kenshin's willing to fight, he's willing to protect people, he's willing to defend, he's willing to engage in these duels, but somewhere in the back of his mind is always this idea of, because of all the horrible things I did, and because I was a manslayer, and because of this or that, like, if I eventually die, maybe that's okay. If I die protecting somebody, or if I die doing this, or, it's like he was leaving some space for death to be okay. It's okay if I die in some respect, right? But he's missing that vital component, which is that drive, that will to live, that keeps you alive, that makes you stronger. In order to overcome this technique, Kenshin had to exert himself in a way where his desire to live was the strongest element of his attack. In other words, it wasn't about defeating his opponent as much as it is, I need to survive. I need to survive for Kaoru. I need to survive for Yaiko and, Sanosuke. for everybody else, for, the fate of Japan, whatever it may be. He spends all of his time being a wanderer and protecting other people and thinking that life is so sacred and valuable, but not directing that upon himself, because of the guilt that he feels, or because of his history or everything. He doesn't feel like his life is on the same level as everybody else's, but it's in this moment that he realizes that it has to be. I have to value myself. I have to value my life as deeply as I value all the people that I'm trying to protect, because if I die, then that's going to destroy things for everybody. Like, there's an importance here that I never felt before, And what I think is so cool about this is, like, unlike any other shonen anime series usually, where the power-up is coming from a place of, like, a transformation or some kind of, sacred item to power them up, or even the power of friendship or whatever it is. This is different. This is a power-up that's essentially about the drive to continue living even if you don't feel like you're worthy enough to. Even if you feel like your life isn't as important as other people, you have to keep yourself afloat. You have to keep yourself going. You have to protect yourself, because that's where it starts. You have to protect yourself first before you can protect other people a lot of the times. And part of the reason why this meant so much to me when I was younger, I've been depressed a lot in my life, but, it was very, very strong when I was younger, when I was a teenager and in my 20s in particular. And having a series that kind of showed you the value of continuing to move forward, like the value of redemption, number one, but also the value of being able to be there for the people that matter most in your life, to not so selfishly kind of throw things away just because you might feel a particular way. I don't know. It resonated with me in a way that the first time I experienced it, and, not to, like, compare and contrast, but I do think the 90s version of this scene did it way better. But that's also, because that's how I first saw it. That's how I first experienced it. And that scene, along with the music and the time that I saw it, just had this impact on me. It just had one of those life kind of viewpoint change moments, that happen. Like, all of a sudden I saw things a little bit differently, I guess, in a strange way, as cheesy or as corny as that may sound. Watching that for the first time way back when, I kind of felt something like I do have to continue living. Like, it is important to keep going. With as difficult as things may be or feel, that there's something there on the other end. It's like, but you have to have that drive. You have to have that fire. You have to have that impulse that doesn't allow you to lay back and just say, it's fine. It's fine if it doesn't work out. It's fine if I die, whatever. You want to have that will to continue to live. That survivor instinct. And I've always been drawn to stories like that. Like, I love the movie The Revenant. I love The Grey. I love movies about human survival and human struggle, where you're in a situation where it may be easier to roll over and die, but for some reason you continue to get up and keep moving. It's why I love Berserk. I mean, for many reasons, but that's one of the core themes that stands out to me. But, this might have been one of the first to really kind of hit that, a specific line for me with that core theme that really mattered to me. So this is one of those scenes, one of those moments that I'll always remember. And I don't think this version was as good as the 90s version. I've gone back and forth too. There's been moments of the new anime I said, I have admitted were better than the 90s. But this one, if you like this scene, if you like this moment, if it resonated with you in some way, I would recommend watching the 90s Kenshin anime episode for this scene because it's fantastic. But yeah, anyways, guys, we don't really know the details of it. I don't want to spoil it, but there are significant details of the Amakakaru Ryuno Hirameki that are not given here. And also, the end of the episode shows the wound on Hiko forming. Very strange the way that they did it, where it seemed like there was nothing there at first, and then like the indentation, which you can tell if Kenshin had a real sword and it wasn't blunt, you know, he would have just cut him straight in half, you know. So yeah, Hiko is going to be you know, a little bit out of commission here, but Kenshin knows the technique, and now we're going to move forward in the series with that. The next episode, I think we're going to meet the final members of the Jupongatana that we haven't seen yet, and then, you know, we're gonna barrel forward. So let me know what you guys thought about this episode down below. Let me know if you know, if you're an older older man like me, if you remember seeing this scene very young, and if it had some kind of impact on you, or just what you felt about it now. So let me know all your thoughts down below. Thanks as always for everyone that sends in a super thanks every week. I really do appreciate it, man, and it helps out a lot. The Kenshin videos might not get a lot of views, but I feel like there's a lot of love, you know, and that means a lot too. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.